So tonight we're holding Mazal Kashat, Sagittarius, number 9 in the zodiac. We have 3 signs to go: Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. Gdi, Dli, and Dagim. Mazal Kashat happens to be our first example of the third in its element. For those of you who were here from the very beginning, we discussed the 4 elements of which everything in this world consists of, even human beings: fire, air, water, and earth. And depending on which sign you are, depending on the month, the hour that you were born, you may have one prominent or dominant element. And depending on which one it is, there will be certain characteristics that will be more emphasized. So from the 12 signs, there are 4 groups, and in each group there are 3 signs that belong to an element, 3 that belong to the fire, 3 that belong to the air, 3 that belong to the water, 3 that belong to the earth. And each one of the 3 share certain common characteristics, but they're different, they're unique. Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius are all fire elements. And what they all have in common is that they are full of energy and drive. More than the rest, more than the air, more than the water, more than the earth. And when I say energy and drive, I mean that there's also different kind of emphasis in their life, their values, their priorities, their ideas, what drives them, what moves them, what interests them is always going to be something different than what will interest the water, the earth signs. That's one of the things that make people very, very different, is the element. What is the most dominant element? Very important for me to repeat that not everyone is very, very pure of his element. And that is why in discussing a particular sign, you may say, well, 80 to 85% matches my sign from what I've read, from what I've described. That is because there are other factors that contribute to the individuality, to the personality, and a great deal has to do with the hour. The hour is very significant, and in any particular day, you can have 12 different personalities within the same sign, right? Well, right now, we've entered Leo, right? What is it, July 25th? So right now, we're entering Leo birthdays, and even though somebody born today is a Leo, depending on the hour that he's born, there could be additional influences which come from other elements. And of course, the purer you are, which means if you're a double of your sign, then the more you will recognize yourself in the description. And then, of course, there's the genes, their upbringing, and other factors that contribute to the uniqueness of the individual. But a great deal, perhaps 75 to 80% of what you will hear tonight, will belong to Sagittarius. What is the difference between Leo, or Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius? They're all fire signs. There's quite a few differences, even though they share a lot in common because they all belong to the fire element. Nonetheless, Aries is the initiator. Aries, as it's called in astrology, is a cardinal sign. Cardinal meaning the first, the primary, and the one who initiates action. Cardinal signs initiate action. In other words, there's so much energy there that you can't stop him. He just begins, he does things, he doesn't think about what he does. He makes, therefore, a lot of mistakes. He rushes into things. Tremendous amount of energy, sometimes that is unstoppable. That is Aries. Tremendous amount of energy. And, of course, that amount of energy can be somewhat reduced by other factors in the chart. It doesn't mean that every Aries is just full of so much energy that he's just unstoppable. But they're, Baruch Hashem, gifted with a lot of drive, which usually means that you will find very, very few Aries that are lazy. Very few. Leo takes all that energy and does not necessarily initiate. He contains it. He wants to preserve. He wants to be king. He wants to have everything that was initiated blossom or prosper and succeed. He's an excellent manager in taking a project that has begun by others. Doesn't mean he cannot begin by himself. But he does not have the exact same initiative as an Aries would have. The ideas don't just pop into his head like they do with an Aries. So a Leo is excellent in managing, in handling, in making sure that this project succeeds, whatever it takes, especially if it requires dedication, enthusiasm. That is what Leo has to make sure that it gets it through. Obviously, Leo has much more than just enthusiasm and managerial skills, and we've already discussed the strengths and weaknesses of that sign. But being a fire sign, he can definitely handle all that was inherited from the Aries very, very well, and do a much better job, actually, than the Aries. The Aries will command, the Aries will drive, he will be the engine behind everything, but the Leo will contain it and make sure it does what it's intended to do. Comes along the Sagittarius, which we'll be speaking about tonight. They're the more adaptable. They are the ones that are capable of making the changes. They're the ones that are going to say, stop, I have a different idea. I want to argue about it. I do not necessarily agree with what was said and what was done before. See? But with the same drive, with the same energy, but from a totally different angle. Very adaptable and very capable too, in a different way, in expressing all that fire. So Mazal Hashem, we will see tonight the strengths and the weaknesses of Sagittarius as we've seen with the other signs. I just want to share with you a saying in Yiddish. For those of you, I don't know how many of you understand Yiddish, but there's a very nice saying in Yiddish, Alts im einem is nishtu bei keinem. All the good qualities in one you will find in no one. There is not one sign that has all the good qualities, not all the weaknesses, not all the strengths. Everyone has a fair share of the strengths and weaknesses. And Hashem has put us all down here in this world to contribute in some way. We need every one of us. And of course, it's not easy to get along with everyone, because some people are so opposite from each other. But believe it or not, if you're going to be a mensch, which is another Yiddish word for being a decent human being, you can really learn to live with everyone. What you have to remember is that everyone has strengths and weaknesses. And as long as they're not evil, if somebody's evil, that's a whole different story. As long as they're not evil, we have to try to understand where they're coming from, what's driving them, what's motivating them. And once we understand that, we will judge them differently. We will look at them differently. And that will help us get along with them. We may not agree. We may not want to be like them. But we definitely could admire some of the traits of those who are totally opposite to us, because we need them. In the end, somehow, we need their contribution. As I have always have done, I'd like to give an introduction. This is not only about astrology, this is also about refining one's character, working on one's midot, learning about our own personal weaknesses, what area we need to improve, what needs to be corrected. And Sagittarius has certain strengths, certain ma'alot v'chisronot, and the 5 points that I will point out in the introduction contain some things that we could learn from him and some things that he has to learn. Point number 1, rabbis tell us, L'olam yeh adam yireh shamayim baseter kemo she'u bagalui. One should always be as God-fearing in private as he is in public. When one is in public, when one has an audience, when people see you, you may tend to behave in a certain way. Whether you are impressing them, whether you're just embarrassed to do what you ordinarily would do. So people in public do not always necessarily behave as they do in private. And therefore, when no one is looking in your private quarters, you may behave differently. One may be a gentleman and very kind and nice to people on the outside, and at home he's abusive of his spouse. Yeah, this happens. Very quiet, makes a nice impression. All of a sudden at home he turns into an animal. Zegovel bitzviut, as we say in Hebrew, it borders on hypocrisy. But I don't want to call him an hypocrite. It's simply a character or a characteristic that he possesses that tends to come out in private and doesn't come out so much in public. In other words, he's able to contain it very professionally. Not that he's a hypocrite, not that he's two-faced. He's just somehow, in his personality, many of us can do that, is we just handle ourselves differently when we're in public, and when we're in private, when we're amongst our closest relatives, we feel more comfortable, we're not as embarrassed, we behave differently. So it's not so much hypocrisy, but it comes close to it. Rabbis warn us that if you want to be a man of integrity, a woman of integrity, which we've spoken about before, how it's important to strive for integrity, to be amiti, to be always truthful at all times. It's not enough to say the Amidah, the Shmon Esrei, for 55 minutes, moving your head and giving the impression that you're a big tzaddik, that you focus on every word, that you intend to say every word, that you cry. It may not be sincere. It may not be a sincere prayer. It is important that whatever you do in public, you copy and you do in private too. And it's actually a greater challenge in private than it is in public, because nobody sees you except for Hashem. If one remembers that Hashem is observing us at all times, at every moment, even bechadrei chadarim, in the closet, where nobody else could see, then obviously one would be more careful. A lot of people do not sin because they don't want to be caught. They don't want to be embarrassed. But if they would know that He is observing every action and hears every word that we say, regardless of where we are, we would behave differently. Therefore, rabbis emphasize to us, strive for integrity, be who you are, be truthful. Whatever you are in the outside, be in the inside. In other words, if you're God-fearing, hopefully in the outside, strive to be God-fearing in the inside, in private. And that is the ultimate test if somebody is truly God-fearing, when he knows that even though nobody is watching him, he's still careful as much as he would be careful when he's on the outside. Point number 2, be suspicious of all, but be respectful of them. In the rabbi's words, kabdeu vechashdeu. Rabbis tell us, it's actually the other way around. Be respectful of everyone. Really, be nice to everyone, but be suspicious. You don't know someone. You've never met him before. Are you going to invite him into your home? Let him sleep in your home? It could be dangerous. I mean, I think all of us have heard of all sorts of terrible stories of people who were let into their home, assuming that they were good people, and it turned out that they were animals. They did terrible things. You're going to give somebody a loan that you don't know. You're going to ask for co-signers. You're going to be careful how much you give him, because you don't know who he is. You're going to ask for witnesses. So be respectful, be kind to everyone, but be suspicious. Don't be naive. In other words, here we're taking a good point, a good midah, a good quality. We're saying, okay, this man is honest, he's generous, he's going to be helpful, but be careful. Because anybody who's generous and kind, people eventually will find out your address. And they will want to come over your home. You invite everybody, you give them a meal, you give them a room. They'll take advantage of you. So it's very important to develop good midot, but be very careful that nobody should abuse that or take advantage. So be suspicious of all. You want to be suspicious no matter how long his beard is, no matter how religious, regardless of his reputation. You never know. Nobody knows anyone perfectly. There may be something that was left out. You know, it's like, imagine just inviting a friend over, a real nice friend, and you didn't know that he has an allergy to peanuts, and you put some peanuts in your dessert. I mean, that could be a disaster for him. You did not suspect anything. I mean, you should have asked, or you should have been told, right? There could always be something small that we may not know about our friends, about our guests. So therefore, in all relationships, you have to maintain a certain distance. You have to be cordial. You have to be nice. Be respectful with everyone. But be suspicious. You never know what his or her intention may be. When they approach you for a favor, when they need your money, they may not intend to give you back the loan. You know, there are some people that forget about their loans, but there are individuals who, when they come over to you, they already do not intend to give it back to you. You know, that's it, it's gone. Do you want to give that money away? Be prepared. And point number 3 is very popular. We know that from Pirkei Avot. Ezehu ashir hasameach b'chelko. Who is rich? One who is content with his lot. Rabbis emphasize that money does not bring happiness. A lot of people have tons of money and they're not happy. Who is rich? One who's content with his lot. There's another Gemara that says, who is truly a wealthy man? One who has a wife who's beautiful in her deeds. Mi sheyesh lo isha na'at b'ma'aseha. that brings happiness, that brings true wealth. The point that I want to speak about is that to be content with one's lot requires the right attitude. It requires a certain amount of optimism. It requires a certain amount of understanding that everything is letovah, which we've spoken about before, that everything that comes down is for our own good and for our own benefit. Be happy with what you have, because this is what Hashem wants you to have. If Hashem would think that something else would bring you happiness, He would give it to you. But obviously, if He did not give it to you, it's because maybe it would destroy your life. Many people, as soon as they won their lottery, their lives were destroyed. Their lives fell apart. They ended up in a divorce. So be happy with what you have. That is true wealth, not necessarily money. Life and death depend on the tongue. Very important point. Amavet b'chaim b'yad halashon. Or as the other pasuk says, Mi ha'isha chafetz chaim, ohev yamin lirot tov, netzol leshonecha mira, sferatecha midaber mirma. You want to live a long life? Be careful with your tongue. Life and death depend on the tongue. Depending on what we say, what comes out of our mouth, can be very destructive. It could be very beneficial too. It could save our life. And as attorneys know, everything depends on the right word or the wrong word. If you say the right word or the wrong word, you can have a tremendous impact on the outcome of the case, regardless of whether it's a jury case or the case is going to be heard by the judge alone. Obviously, everything is min hashamayim. Nevertheless, you have to prepare yourself. The words can make you stumble. And in life, this is so important because some people are very good in how they communicate. They're very tactful, and some are not so tactful, as we're going to see tonight. And because of that, they get into a lot of trouble. Number 5, a very, very powerful point. Ha'emet hi kveda, lachen nosea muatim. Truth is heavy, that is why its bearers are few. Truth is heavy. Truth in reality is obvious. If one searches for it, he will find it. Avraham Avinu was no genius. As a child, he was able to discover the truth of creation, that there's a creator, that there's a boss who's managing this world. But people get away from it. People escape from the truth because it's heavy. It means that you are committing yourself to a certain life, to certain responsibilities. You have to adopt certain values. Truth is not easy. And the reason why most people do not become too observant or religious once they know about it is because it's too difficult. In their mind, it's too difficult. What's difficult for them is to give up their lifestyle, their routine. They'd like to enjoy life the way they think it should be enjoyed. And therefore, they're not willing to carry the truth. Even though the truth is obvious, it's written in the Torah, it's been given over. We believe in it, but we don't really want to carry it. As Bilam is known to have said, let's live like a goy and die like a Jew. Yeah, that's what some people would like to do. To live like a goy, a life of hefkerut, of complete freedom to do anything your heart desires, but no accountability. It's not really difficult to be a Jew, as some have expressed it. It just requires a lot of responsibility. And for some, that is too heavy, that is too much, and that is why they tend to run away from it. Those who pursue the truth, those who only want to know the truth, will find the truth not too difficult at all. But initially, it gives the impression that it's hard, because, of course, it requires certain responsibilities. Sagittarius begins November 22nd approximately and goes until December 21st. As I said earlier, he's the third one in the fire element. Because of the fire element, they're very optimistic. So is Aries a little bit, and so is Leo, but Sagittarius is the most optimistic of all the signs. When it comes to optimism, they're optimists. Freedom-loving, good-humored, honest, straightforward, intellectual, philosophical. But they can also be blindly optimistic and careless, irresponsible, superficial, tactless, and restless. There's other likes and dislikes here. This is just a general description of Sagittarius. We're going to get much more into the fine details of the man, the woman, the child, the boss. And as I said earlier, a great deal can be learned from this. But the goal is not to just know about it, is to see where a Sagittarius has to work on himself. And for us who are not Sagittarius, to get to know him a little bit better, so we don't blame him or accuse him wrongly. The more we know about a sign, the better we will have the easier it will be for us to get along with him. So how many Sagittarius do we have today? I know some are not saying. Anyway. Yeah. Fire, the fire element is a very powerful element. As we said, it's full of energy and drive. But fire can burn, right? Fire can be destructive. So we will see the ups and downs, the strengths and the weaknesses of Sagittarius. This particular sign combines a happy disposition with an eagerness to talk. The reason I write that is because I found in my experience the Sagittarius in some ways is similar to Gemini. He is the mutable sign. He's the adaptable, where air is the adaptable, where Gemini is the adaptable of the air. Sagittarius is the adaptable or mutable, changeable of the fire. And there's a certain tendency and an enjoyment to talk. And always with a smile, with a happy disposition. His speech can be very direct and outspoken. Now Aries is outspoken too. And so is Scorpio. Remember Scorpio? We just talked about Scorpio 2 weeks ago. The difference is that Scorpio can be very brutal and unsensitive when he's direct. Sagittarius doesn't mean to hurt you. He's so innocent when he's outspoken. In his tactless ways, he means no harm. He may be actually trying to be funny without realizing that he's hurting someone's feelings by being so outspoken, by telling you what he thinks of you. He's totally oblivious to his blunt speech, completely oblivious. He really thinks either he's funny or he just wants to be honest. And that is another trait that we'll see about Sagittarius later on. They're so honest and therefore so sincere that they don't think that they're hurting anybody's feelings. And they feel terrible when they find out that they have hurt somebody's feelings. They're honest, frank, and earnest. Most of them are extroverts. Everybody here know what an extrovert is, right? We have introverts that are more closed and reserved and stay at home. And then we have the extroverts that are more sociable. They like outdoor life. They enjoy being around people. They're very confident of themselves. And as a result of this ability to interact with people and their confidence, they love to give advice, free advice to others. Even if they're not talking, they're great idealists. They will be dreaming and aiming for the highest goals. Now, Capricorn is also a very ambitious sign that we will talk about. But here we're talking about an idealist. You know what an idealist is? He may not necessarily carry out this idea. He has ideas. He has a cause that he will champion. He's dreaming about it, wanting it. He may pursue it a little bit, not necessarily will achieve it. But they definitely are thinkers of how to do certain things, how to get things done better, especially if it's a very important cause. They'll talk a lot about it. They have a restless nature. And this is, again, fire. They can't just stay at home and do nothing. They're restless. But most of the time, they're cheerful and friendly and can talk to friends and enjoy being around people. They love that which is exciting and don't mind at all if there is an element of risk involved. Now, this is very similar to Aries. And what the two of them share in common is that they love challenges, even if it may involve some element of risk or danger. Many of them that belong to this sign love speed, fast cars, and roller coasters. Now, I'm sure if you go to a roller coaster, you will see a Gemini too. And I'm sure you will see an occasional Taurus who wants to have some fun. And I'm sure you will find other signs too. Leos and Aries for sure. It doesn't mean that only you go to Disneyland and it's only full of Sagittarius at the roller coasters. But you've heard of daredevils with those bikes jumping over the mountains and the hills. You have to have guts. Now, there's a lot of signs that have guts, but some signs are not crazy, right? A Capricorn will not do something that's crazy, even if there's 1% chance of danger to his life, especially if he's married and has kids. He would never think of it. Now, remember Bush, the older Bush? He says, I want one more jump. He meant a parachute. He wanted to reminisce what it felt like jumping out of an airplane in World War II, I think it was. I want one more jump, because, who knows how long he's going to live. And, of course, that involved risk, no matter how good of a parachute it is. But he's a Gemini, right? So he wasn't so afraid. And after all, his kids are grown up anyway. I don't know how much he cares for his wife. That's another story. So, that could be a factor too. Who knows? Sagittarius is very brave. In that bravado, I guess we can use, helps him to be able to deal with dangerous situations. Where a Leo is good in times of danger. He didn't ask for it. He's there, a Leo, great commander. Commander-in-chief Leos, they will act on the spot and they will be able to direct. Excellent general. The problem is he's, the ego and other problems to do with that. But you have to give him credit. He'll know how to deal with a situation like that. But Sagittarius will be able to take upon himself a challenge, even if it involves risk. They have a temper that can flare suddenly. Now the temper of the Sagittarius is not like Aries. Every 10, 15 minutes, a true Aries can get upset at just anything. Aries can raise his voice. And now raising a voice is not always a temper, but to people who are sensitive, even raising their voice doesn't sound good. And that can go up and down every few minutes, actually 25 times a day. But it calms down. Sagittarius is fire and also has a temper. And do they have a temper? It could be also very, very temperamental, but does not flare up as much as Aries or Leo, but it can flare up suddenly too. Now, what's different about Sagittarius that you will not find in too many other signs, and this is really something unique about them, is that they're very, very funny. They are the clowns of all the signs. They can really put up a show. When they're in a joking mood, they can be hilarious. And even as adults, they know how to play the role of the clown. Now, it could be that if you go to a circus and you ask a clown, what is your sign? He'll tell you Libra. I can imagine that. It's possible. It's hard to believe, but it's possible. But I'm sure every sign, except for a few, that I can never see them as clowns. But Sagittarius, typical. They can be very funny, very much in a joking mood. And that is a great strength that they have. He's the greatest optimist of all the signs, as I mentioned earlier. Has a very positive, good attitude, but sometimes naively so. In other words, sometimes he thinks that things are going to get better, things are going to be okay. He's very trusting, and he should not be. It can get him into trouble. But that optimism comes from strength, comes from confidence. Zeh beseder, everything will be okay, I'll deal with it. It's not so bad, it's not the end of the world. It takes a certain amount of confidence and strength for that. And that's very, very good. That's a beautiful midah, but they have to be careful not to be naive about it. He refuses to accept the seriousness of life. In other words, he wants to look at the good side. He likes the challenge. He doesn't want to believe that things are so bad. He can be brave, but he's not happy when burdened with responsibility. It doesn't mean he can't be a responsible person. They don't like to be burdened with too many responsibilities. On the other hand, he can take on a cause with blind devotion and fiercely defend his cause from unfair attacks. As I said earlier, they like to champion causes, and if they are on track, they can do so with a lot of devotion, and they will defend this cause from anything that they perceive as being unfair. If he feels abused, he may react physically. Now, this is another interesting point about Sagittarius that you may not encounter too often, Baruch Hashem. The reason I say you may not encounter this because Baruch Hashem, everybody here I think is Jewish. or at least everybody here is working on themselves and is careful, and we don't react physically. We don't punch people in the nose when we are upset at them. Now, some people, of course, lose it. And when I say lose it, it could be other signs too. It could be even a Pisces. We're going to see. Even the most sensitive sign can react physically. Scorpio can be very, very physical. So I'm not picking on Sagittarius, but it simply is very typical for Sagittarius to react like that, because they react very quickly and later they regret it. They can, my example over here is because they don't like to run away from a fight, they're very brave. They may react physically and later on they may feel remorse and make amends. If you are rude to him, he may first give you a black eye and the next day buy you flowers. In other words, they will regret, they will feel bad about what they did, but they've reacted quickly. And I explain why they reacted like that. This is because he speaks and acts first and then considers the consequences. And that is one of the weaknesses of almost all the fire signs, is that they don't think about all the consequences of their action. Libra spends too much time considering all the consequences, the pros and the cons, and the fire element doesn't consider almost at all. So Sagittarius sometimes, because he's so quick to react, if he does it physically, he may regret it. He may even rebel against authority. Now, there are signs like that, other signs that also rebel against authority. And Sagittarius is one. Many of them love the stage and enjoy performing before an audience. This is a fire sign, and therefore they like the audience, they like and they enjoy performing. They're great actors. They make people laugh. However, many times the people are not always laughing at their jokes, but the bad timing of the joke. Here the Sagittarius is happy, he's getting all this applause. You know, he's happy that people like his joke, and it's really not the joke that they like so much. They're laughing at him because the timing was not right. There was just something awkward about his joke. Their sarcasm can sometimes come across as very insulting. Many of them have an interest in religion and are very much stimulated by intellectual pursuits, in particular of a deeper kind. This is another known fact about Sagittarians, that they have the ability to ponder deep subjects. Many of them become philosophers, psychologists, and very, very religious. Now, when you become too religious, you can become a fanatic. So there are certain signs when they overdo something, they take it to an extreme. But because they're more intellectual, I don't know if too many of them become fanatics. As you will see later on, they're very, very honest and very much in pursuit of the truth. But because of their fire, you never know. The fire element is not always logical, not always reasonable. Others have a love for the outdoors and enjoy sports. A lot of Sagittarians are into sports, and all of them are very fond of traveling. If you go into a Sagittarius home, you will find a suitcase close by. They're always thinking of going away. They like the outdoors, whether it's camping or traveling. It's a sign that really enjoys traveling all over the world. You'll meet, maybe not every Sagittarius, but you'll meet a lot of them who have been in many countries, are always traveling. Let's save it for later. Yeah. They have good memories and remember many details. But this is funny. Here they have an excellent memory, but they're always losing their car keys, their wallets, their gloves. It's very interesting, but somehow there is a lack of focus here. It's difficult to explain, but it really happens so much to them. They have very good memories about certain things, but when it comes to other things, they just lose it. Neither can they hold on to a secret. Now, what's really funny about Sagittarius is the next point that I made, but in order to understand the next point, you have to know a little Yiddish. In Yiddish, there are two individuals, one who's called a Shlumil and one who's called a Shlumazal. You know what the difference between a Shlumil and a Shlumazal is? The two of them are walking down the hallway. Shlumil is holding the cup of tea, and he spills it, and the Mazal gets it on his pants. I don't want to call any sign a Shlumiel, but a Sagittarius can be very clumsy. Many times he trips over, bumps into things, and this tends to add to the funny part of their nature. Not every one of them, but a lot of them, for some reason, it has to do with, I think, their thinking. It really has to do because they're thinking and doing things and not focused on everything, and because of that, they just, oh, where did I leave my keys, and where this, and just bumped into something. Very, very typical of Sagittarius. Now, you may think, wait a minute, I know somebody exactly like that, and he is a Virgo. Well, not a Virgo. And he is an Aquarius. It could be that he has Sagittarius in him. It could be that the hour is Sagittarius, and that is why he's tripping. That's why he's more funny than the typical. He may try his hand in gambling and drinking. Now we're getting to the vices. Vices, people have vices, people have ta'avot, some people more, some people less, some people have many, and some people have all of the above, right? Sagittarius has an interest. He's curious, and he may try gambling and drinking. Now, why does he gamble? We will see later on he has a certain weakness with money. Plus, he's curious. Plus, remember, he likes challenges. When you combine these characteristics, you can see that they lend themselves to that. Certain signs will never even dream of gambling. Perhaps if they're stuck in Las Vegas because their plane couldn't leave on time, they'll put a quarter in a machine. You know, some signs, just to try their luck. Maybe. Some don't believe in it. Sagittarius will not mind, actually will try it out. And he has to be careful. Because when you try something and it becomes a habit, you know what that could lead to. Gambling and drinking are the biggest vices of Sagittarius. In money, he may be extravagant, he may be. And not careful enough. In food, if not controlled, he can easily become obese. Now, other signs can become obese too, but so can Sagittarius. Obese means overweight. In family relationships, many are disinterested in family ties. Now, that's very interesting about Sagittarius also, that I find that for some reason they do not always believe in loving blood relations unless they deserve loving. They're not as close or show as much interest in their in-laws, in all the relatives of the other side, as much as other signs would show. In general, the Sagittarius is really a generous individual. He's not a whiner or complainer. Remember, he's brave, he's confident, he's willing to help. If somebody needs his help, he'll be willing to help. He's enthusiastic, sometimes a bit too hasty in his enthusiasm, and he's extremely honest. Of all the signs, I'm not going to say he's the most honest, but to him, truth and honesty is extremely important. Rule number one to him is to be honest. He's a staunch believer in being truthful, which is also why he's very direct in his speech. He's truthful. This is what I believe. This is what I will say. He does so in total innocence. And he has a unique combination of wit, intelligence, and a fiery drive. In other words, it's not just wit. In other words, there's intelligence too. And he's enthusiastic. That means that he does things happily and not lazily. But sometimes rushes too much because of the fire in him. Fire signs sometimes rush into doing something. They are very independent in their nature. There are other signs that are independent too, but Sagittarius is one, which is why they rebel against confinement. They don't want to be controlled. They don't want to be held back. Sagittarius are very curious, and they will want to know the why of everything you say to them. Very curious, intellectual. They need to know and need to understand. Otherwise, they'll have a hard time doing whatever it is that you're asking of them to do. Why? Because. Why? That's very typical of Sagittarius. Hates dishonesty and lies and will be able to spot the phonies. If you smell a con artist, bring along a Sagittarius, and they'll tell you if this is a con artist or not. Because they do not like dishonesty, and they're very, very sensitive to dishonesty. Many of them are very good in figuring out if this man is truthful or not. Okay, let's see some differences between men and women, especially for those of you who are still single and you're dating a Sagittarius man. Well, he's an optimist, sometimes trusting with naive belief. He's honest and very much against dishonesty, like we just saw. Get used to his frankness. He'll tell you things the way they are. Very blunt and dugli, as we say in Hebrew. Has many friends. That's the kind of life that he leads. Usually, if he's a healthy Sagittarius and has a normal life, he will have a circle of friends. He's not the Capricorn or the Taurus that don't mind not having too many friends. As long as they have one good one, that's enough for them. He will always have a circle of friends. One of the main weaknesses is his tactlessness and thoughtlessness. How could you say he's not thoughtful? Because he doesn't realize that he's sometimes insulting and hurting and stepping on people's toes. He may seek only a casual relationship. That is also very important, but not so much in our circle. This is much more applying to non-Jews. I included it anyway, so you should have an idea that Sagittarius cannot always or do not always want to commit themselves to a full-blown relationship. Let's just be friends. They're not sure. They haven't made up their mind. They don't know if they really want it. Remember, they don't like responsibility sometimes. But if they're Jewish, they're observant, they obviously want to have a family, they want to settle down, that's different. But many of them do not necessarily want to have a deep relationship. Needs a woman with same attitude about life and people as his. That is what will speak to him. That is what will make him happy, if she very much goes along with his attitude. Give him freedom. He's generous, he's enthusiastic, and he's young in spirit. Enjoys the outdoors and traveling. Does not want relatives to interfere. Remember the mother-in-law? He has a hard time with that one. No relative, he doesn't want relatives to interfere in his life. Don't dampen his fiery ideas. He may have some ideas. You have to listen to them. Especially when he's in the mood. Don't try to dampen, in other words, don't try to take away any of his enthusiasm. He won't be too strict with the kids. He's not this very, very strict type. And he will be a pal to his kids. Sagittarius tend to be very friendly, including their children. Children of a Sagittarius usually do not have a relationship of a father figure. You know, some signs are more of a father figure, the respect, the awe, the distance. The Sagittarius is a pal. He's more of a friend to his kids and the kids with the father. Just a different kind of relationship. I'm not saying it's good or bad, it's just a different kind of relationship. Women. Again, many of the things that I've said about the men apply to the women. Many things that you might find here about the women can apply to children, to men. But it's just more of an approximate separation of characteristics. Sagittarius woman is very outspoken. So is the man. But just be prepared for it if you're dating one. She can be very outspoken. She may say things you would rather not hear. Let me tell you a story, and you will understand what I mean by that. There was once a Sagittarius employee, was in some company, who found out that a co-worker lost everything. Lost her home, lost her money, and she really felt bad. Remember, we said Sagittarius are generous. Okay? So she said, I'm going to champion this cause, all right? Sagittarius, I'm going to take care of her. He says, you know what? We're going to Saks Fifth Avenue next week. I'm taking you and I'm buying you all the clothes you need. Sounds good? Generous? Sagittarius. She comes to the store, arrives with her. She takes a look at her co-worker. I think we're going to have to try first the fat girls department. She said it with a straight face. Could you imagine what that other woman was thinking? And she said it out of innocence. And after she realized, it took a few minutes to sink in, that the other individual was changing colors. And if we don't find anything in the fat girls department, you know what? We can go to the tents in the camping department. Maybe something there will fit you. In other words, she was trying to be humorous to make up for what she just said, fat girls. Maybe we'll find something in the tents. That was her way of covering up and saying, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't really mean it. It was just more of a joke. And she didn't really mean to hurt the other person's feelings. She just said, oh, we may actually have to go there first, and see, after all, That was not sarcasm. That was being honest. That was being direct. But that was not being sensitive. And that was being naive, too. I mean, come on. But she went and she bought her what she needed. I mean, she was generous. So, be prepared. They do it out of total innocence. Can be sarcastic and can have a rage. Can be bright and intelligent, but with a naive outlook. Because they're very trusting. They sometimes, think positive, optimistic, but you have to be suspicious. Remember, we said that before. You have to be very careful. Does not lie, even though you may want her to. And the reason I put that in parentheses is because, we sometimes want to compliment. You want to say something nice. But she does not lie. So she will say it as it is. Believe things will get better. And if not, is very accepting of the situation. They actually get along very well, very adaptable. Does not want to be ordered around. Ask her, don't tell her. Prefers applause to romantic phrases. Now the reason I put this in is because people communicate differently when people are married. People are very close friends. Some people like to hear certain words speak to them. Sagittarius very much likes the audience. He's not so much into the romance. And therefore, if you approve, if you encourage him, if you applaud to his ideas, that is much more becoming to him. That is much more appealing to him than just romantic phrases that don't mean anything. They're very good in breaking the ice. Breaking the ice is a term used, you come to a social gathering, they can break the ice, they can make it very funny, they can crack a joke in a social affair, but they can also raise some eyebrows because they might say something that, will be very, very strange. Very independent and cannot stand weak men. Can be extravagant with money, so you have to watch out. She may need a maid. Now, I usually did not put that in, even though almost every woman can use a maid. It's very, very helpful in the house. And if you could afford it, take 2 maids. Why not? You have other things to do with your time. But of course, it depends if you can afford it. A woman always has to be busy, obviously, and occupied. A Sagittarius needs a maid because she doesn't want to stay at home. There are very few signs that are very homey. Cancer is a homey sign. Taurus can be at home. There's some signs that love their home. They don't eat out as much. Sagittarius is more of an outgoing, outdoors, doesn't want to stay at home, doesn't want to be confined to the house. So she would need a maid if she wants to get things done. Gets along well with her children, no problem with that, easygoing. Entertains well as a hostess, makes people very welcome. Very good quality for a Sagittarius, that they really can make people welcome. They're friendly, they're generous, they don't have that problem, they're always smiling. That's a good thing, except of course when they're upset. But usually when they're hosting and entertaining, they're not going to be upset. Will give you loyalty, trust, and affection. Many will, not just Sagittarius, but you can trust that if she is a normal Sagittarius woman, she will be loyal, will give you her trust and affection. Just some advice for Sagittarius children. I could give a lot of advice, but this is just a list that I compiled of some basic advice that as parents, if you have a Sagittarian child, is important to remember. There's other points too, but these are things that I put together that I felt were the most significant. A Sagittarius child needs to be liked. You might think, what about other children too? Of course, every child likes to be liked, no, but they need that approval, they need that applause, they need to know that what they're doing is good. They need to be convinced of that more than other children. They're usually more on the happy side, playful children, likes to be around grown-ups. Wherever there's laughter and talking, that is their place. That is where they like to be. A lot of them, if they're very, very small, will not fall asleep unless there are people talking and laughing. They just like to be around that kind of an atmosphere. They will want to know, why does it matter what people think? That's very typical of a Sagittarius child, maybe who at a later age, at a later stage in life, they will question you and they will want to know, why does it matter so much what people think? They may question everything and search for the truth. They will be convinced if logic and solid reason are used. And that's a very important point. It's very hard to convince a Sagittarius. You can't just convince them. And the only way you could do it, they're not completely stubborn like the Taurus or Capricorn. They can be convinced, but you need to use logic and solid reason. If they hear the logic, if you're reasonable, they will be convinced. Maybe idealistic and look for a cause. Needs to be taught how to economize, how to spend his money. They have a problem with money, remember? So this is something that they have to be taught. Give him lots of room, or give her, if she's a girl, give her lots of room because they're very independent. Cheer him up, or cheer her up. They need to be happy. They need to be in a good mood. So they need to be cheered up. Not that they're depressed necessarily, but they have to feel good. They have to feel happy. Be fair, and he will respect the rules. And I left that for the last because that is a very important point with Sagittarius, being that they very much believe in honesty and fairness and the truth. You need to be fair with them. Now, you need to be fair and truthful with every child. You don't want to promise to a child and not keep your promise. You're teaching them and getting them used to lying. You want to definitely be a good example. But with Sagittarius children, fairness is extremely important, and that is the way to get to him. That is the way to convince him. That is the way to get him to respect the rules, is always show that you keep your word, you're fair, you're logical, you're not illogical, you're reasonable. That is what gets to him. That is what speaks to him. Advice for Sagittarius boss. In case you happen to have a Sagittarius boss, he can make outrageous remarks. Right? Remember that from before? Outrageous remarks, very typical of Sagittarius. Seldom grumpy. That's good to know. You don't want to work for somebody who's grumpy. But he is optimistic, he's good-natured, and usually you will not see a grumpy individual in him. Won't hold a grudge. Not if it's a Scorpio, not if it's a Cancer, Taurus. Some signs can hold a grudge. Sagittarius, no problem. An optimistic and cheerful fellow. Will not tolerate dishonest behavior. Can't cheat. He's honest. Needs to be understood. Can't always understand what he's up to. And he will fight for what he believes is right. He's pretty fair and generous. Loves to talk about his favorite theories. He's sincere, frank, and friendly. As you can see, I was trying to be fair in showing the pros and the cons of this sign like any other sign. A lot of strengths and some weaknesses, and that's what will lead us to the list of midot, as we've done in the past. Just quickly go through the list and see how they stand out for Sagittarius. All right, now that we have an idea of what he is like, does he have a problem with ga'ava? Ga'ava is arrogance or ego. Well, all the fire signs in general have a problem with ego. All the fire signs can be somewhat arrogant, more than any other sign. But there's different levels of arrogance. There's something called being aloof and being self-centered, which is slightly different. Don't confuse them. A person who's self-centered is interested in himself. He's not necessarily arrogant. He doesn't necessarily think highly of himself. But they're very close. So gava means thinking highly of themselves, being arrogant, feeling important. And Sagittarius does not have as much of that as Leo does. Right? But he still may have to work on that. Anava, humbleness. Is he humble? Does he lack humbleness? He may lack some humbleness because if a person who's truly humble would be more sensitive about other people's feelings. When a person is so frank and outspoken, it lacks humbleness. Not that he's so unhumble, but it lacks humbleness. Busha. He can actually be shy. Sagittarius can be shy. I didn't mention it before, but he can be more shy than many other signs. But not always, because if he has a temper, if he's outspoken, he needs to develop a little bit more busha. Azut, he has to work on azut. Azut means to be too aggressive, too impudent, or chutzpah. He can have tons of that, so he has to work on not being too az, panim, too aggressive. Ahava, love, he can definitely develop a deeper relationship with people. He's generous. He doesn't have a problem with generosity, but love is a different idea. Ahava involves deep relationships, lasting relationships, enduring, long-term. And remember we said before, he may just be interested in a casual relationship. Sin'ah, he doesn't hold a grudge. He doesn't hate, so doesn't have a problem with sin'ah. Rachamim, compassion, he can be compassionate? Pretty much. They can be generous, they can be compassionate. Achzariut, are they cruel? Not really. They're not cruel. They can be tough, they can be rough, but not necessarily cruel. Simcha, very much. They have that. They're not usually lacking in happiness. They're very happy, good, happy disposition. Daga, do they worry? Concerns? Now, daga could be good and bad. Worrying about things that you shouldn't worry, and having to worry about things that you should have to worry. They are naive. Remember? They are trusting, so they should be more concerned. I guess we can use the word concern instead of worry. They need to develop a little bit more concern about, hey, what about if it's not so true? What about if I'm just being too naive? On the other hand, they're not too worrisome because they take things in stride. They're very optimistic. Harata. Do they regret? They can regret. If you convince them, they can regret. They can change their minds, so that's very good. But charata can also be negative. Charata means to forget about your responsibilities, your promises. Kaas, anger. They have to work on anger because from time to time they get angry. Ratzon, could you appease them? You can appease them. They're not very stubborn. They can be, but not too stubborn. Kina, are they jealous? Do they have a problem with being jealous of others? No. Zerizut, are they diligent? They can be diligent. They tend to get things done. They're not lazy. Zehirut, are they cautious? Not enough. They have to work on caution because when it comes to money, for example, they can spend it and be extravagant. They're not always cautious when it comes to risks and dangers, remember? Atzlut, are they lazy? No. Nedivut, are they generous? Yes. Tzaikanut, are they stingy? No, because they're generous, so they don't really have a problem with being stingy. Zechira, memory, they have an excellent memory. The problem is that there's certain things that they forget. Well, as long as they don't forget the important things. Shichecha, forgetfulness. It's important to forget the wrongs that were done to you. And they don't have a problem with that. Shatika, can they keep their mouth shut? No, I think they have a problem with that. They love to talk, and they like to say what's on their mind, and they have to be careful with shatika. Shatika means to be silent. Not always open up your mouth. Remember what did we say before? Your mouth can lead you to trouble. The tongue, life and death depend on the tongue. Remember the first point? One of the points? So Sagittarius can get himself into trouble because he says the wrong thing. He might hurt somebody. He might be tactless. Sheker. Totally not Sagittarian because they're truthful. Emet is very much part of their sign. Hanifut, do they flatter? They should learn how to flatter. That's something that they don't have at all. They're truthful. They're so truthful, they don't want to flatter. Lashon hara, do they have a problem or weakness with talking negatively about others? They're usually honest. They're usually seeking the truth. And they will only say something if it's truthful. So I don't know if they would have a problem with Lashon hara, but they are very talkative. So they may sometimes make the mistake of saying the wrong thing about other people. But intentionally, I don't think they would intentionally talk negatively about someone. Teshuvah, they're very, very close to Teshuvah. One of the signs that actually is very close to Teshuvah because they seek the truth. They're very serious about the truth. They're very honest. And guess what? One of the most important midot, if not the most important midot, midah for doing teshuvah is emet. If you follow the truth, you want to know the truth, you're truthful with yourself, then you will accept it and you will do it. People run away from the truth, as we said before. They don't want to carry the truth. Torah. For Torah, to learn Torah, you have to be consistent. You have to be serious. They have a problem with responsibilities and consistency sometimes, but they're capable of learning simply because they have an interest in pursuing that which is deeper learning. They like philosophy, they like religion, so they should have no problem with Torah. Yirat Shamayim, they may have a problem because they have a problem with authority. They don't take orders very easily. Everything has to be explained to them, everything has to make sense to them, so they may have a little problem with Yirat Shamayim. But once they get over that, they can do teshuvah. Savlanut, do they have patience? They're restless. They're the type of restless individuals that therefore will have to work on their patience. Anybody who's restless will have a problem with savlanut. Being patient with people, being patient with problems. Ta'avot, can they have, or do they have vices? Yes. Nobody is exempt of having vices, but some people have more than others. And they have the problem with gambling and drinking, perhaps. And possibly food. Kavod, do they need kavod? They want the applause. And they sometimes have to live without it. So that's something that they need to work on, is not necessarily expect people to applaud them and respect them. Nekama, do they take revenge? No, they don't hold a grudge. Dikaon, are they depressed? They're not the type to get depressed. And finally, the last one, typical, letzanut. Yes, that's completely Sagittarius. They can clown around, they can make fun, they can joke. But letzanut can be very, very negative or could be good too. There are some people that are so good in making jokes that they make people happy. In other words, this is an excellent example of taking a midah and just channeling it for a good cause, using it positively. You can take your talent of being humorous and joking and make people happy. Have you heard of the term batchan? Batchan is an individual who sometimes is hired, sometimes he does it voluntarily, to go to a wedding and make the chatan v'kala happy. And the rabbi tells in the Gemara, you want to see an example of somebody who has olam haba? Here, those two batchanim, those two individuals who are me'aratzot, who are ignoramuses, who are not talmidei chachamim, but they make people happy. There was an individual who was a complete bum. He was a Baal Agala. He used to drive people in his wagon. And a rabbi found out that he has olam haba like no one else in that community. He has olam haba. Yes, because he has one mitzvah that very few people come close to performing as he does. He goes out of his way to make people happy. Chatam v'kala, especially orphans, and that they have nobody to make them happy, and he makes them happy. He dances before them, makes jokes, just does it in such a beautiful way that everybody comes out happy. And you know what the rabbi tells, the same is true with tzedakah. When you give a poor person money, you get several blessings. But when you encourage him and say a kind word, you get even more blessings. It is sometimes more important to say a kind word, to be nice to an individual, even if you only gave him $1.
You have to give tzedakah to a Jewish person?
No, you can be generous to non-Jews as well. There's nothing wrong. On the contrary, it's very nice of you to be generous and kind to all. To perform the mitzvah is mostly with Jews. To perform the mitzvah as a duty, the mitzvah as a duty. Mitzvah means two things. Mitzvah means a good act, a good deed, and it also means a commandment, a duty. We are commanded to do certain things with Jews, but we can definitely perform a good deed even with non-Jews.
Yeah.
Yes.
One rabbi said to us, he was giving a shiur,
Yes.
said to the guys that were learning Gemara, there's one study in the Gemara about if you give tzedakah to a non-Jewish person, if it's enough to go buy something to eat, it's like you're shortening your kingdom.
No, first of all, there's a big difference between idolaters, right? Idolaters and those who are simple non-Jews who believe in God. There's a difference between them. And the halakha is very clear that mipnei darchei shalom, if you want to have a good relationship with the non-Jewish world, you have to be kind and nice and even sometimes go out of your way, if necessary, to help them. Are you obligated? No, there's no chiyuv from the Torah, but it's the correct thing to do if it's easy for you to do. And you were going to ask something before. Yeah. Anyway, this last characteristic, letzanut, is a beautiful example of how a midah can be turned positive or can be turned negative. And many midot are like that. We are all endowed with certain strength, with certain midot. And even though it may be negative, we can turn it around and make it positive. You can be lazy from doing your sins. You can tell the Yetzer Hara mañana, I don't want to do it today. Push him off. Yeah? Every single midah can be used for good and can be used for the bad. I mean, ga'ava, you have to be proud of being Jewish. You have to be not arrogant, but proud of being Jewish. And there's sometimes that you're not allowed to be humble, that you have to speak up. So all of these midot are obviously just examples of certain things that we need to work on ourselves if we have the negative aspect of them. And no sign has all the good and no bad. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. We would be with the angels. Everybody was sent down over here with a unique mission that he has to accomplish. And the personality and the character that he has received is part of the toolbox that he will use to Bezat Hashem accomplish his mission. Thank you very much. You can have 12 different personalities within the same sign, right? Well, right now we've entered Leo, right? What is it, July 25th? So right now we're entering Leo birthdays. And even though somebody born today is a Leo, depending on the hour that he's born, there could be additional influences which come from other elements. And of course, the purer you are, which means if you're a double of your sign, then the more you will recognize yourself in the description. And then, of course, there's the genes, their upbringing, and the other factors that contribute to the uniqueness of the individual. But a great deal, perhaps 75 to 80% of what you will hear tonight, will belong to Sagittarius. What is the difference between Leo or Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius? They're all fire signs. There's quite a few differences, even though they share a lot in common because they all belong to the fire element. Nonetheless, Aries is the initiator. Aries, as it's called in astrology, is a cardinal sign. Cardinal meaning the first, the primary, and the one who initiates action. Cardinal signs initiate action. In other words, there's so much energy there that you can't stop him. He just begins, he does things, he doesn't think about what he does. He makes, therefore, a lot of mistakes. He rushes into things. Tremendous amount of energy, sometimes that is unstoppable. That is Aries. Tremendous amount of energy. And, of course, that amount of energy can be somewhat reduced by other factors in the chart. It doesn't mean that every Aries is just full of so much energy that it's just unstoppable. But they're, Baruch Hashem, gifted with a lot of drive, which usually means that you will find very, very few Aries that are lazy. Very few. Leo takes all that energy and does not necessarily initiate. He contains it. He wants to preserve. He wants to be king. He wants to have everything that was initiated blossom or prosper and succeed. He's an excellent manager in taking a project that has begun by others. Doesn't mean he cannot begin by himself. But he does not have the exact same initiative as an Aries would have. He doesn't, the ideas don't just pop into his head like they do with an Aries. So a Leo is excellent in managing, in handling, in making sure that this project succeeds, whatever it takes, especially if it requires dedication, enthusiasm. That is what Leo has to make sure that it gets it through. Obviously, Leo has much more than just enthusiasm and managerial skills, and we've already discussed the strengths and weaknesses of that sign. But being a fire sign, he can definitely handle all that was inherited from the Aries very, very well, and do a much better job, actually, than the Aries. The Aries will command, the Aries will drive, he will be the engine behind everything, but the Leo will contain it and make sure it does what it's intended to do. Comes along the Sagittarius, which we'll be speaking about tonight. They're the more adaptable. They are the ones that are capable of making the changes. They're the ones that are going to say, stop. I have a different idea. I want to argue about it. I do not necessarily agree with what was said and what was done before. See? But with the same drive, with the same energy, but from a totally different angle. Very adaptable and very capable, too, in a different way in expressing all that fire. So, Bezat Hashem, we will see tonight the strengths and the weaknesses of Sagittarius as we've seen with the other signs. I just want to share with you a saying in Yiddish. For those of you, I don't know how many of you understand Yiddish, but there's a Very nice saying in Yiddish, Alts im einem is nishtu bei keinem. All the good qualities in one you will find in no one. There is not one sign that has all the good qualities, not all the weaknesses, not all the strengths. Everyone has a fair share of the strengths and weaknesses. And Hashem has put us all down here in this world to contribute in some way. We need every one of us. And of course, it's not easy to get along with everyone because some people are so opposite from each other. But believe it or not, if you're going to be a mensch, which is another Yiddish word for being a decent human being, you can really learn to live with everyone. What you have to remember is that everyone has strengths and weaknesses. And as long as they're not evil, if somebody's evil, that's a whole different story. As long as they're not evil, we have to try to understand where they're coming from, what's driving them, what's motivating them. And once we understand that, we will judge them differently. We will look at them differently, and that will help. So tonight we're holding Mazal Kashat, Sagittarius, number 9 in the zodiac. We have 3 signs to go: Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. Gdi, Dli, and Dagim. Mazal Kashat happens to be our first example of the third in its element. For those of you who were here from the very beginning, we discussed the 4 elements of which everything in this world consists of, even human beings: fire, air, water, and earth. And depending on which sign you are, depending on the month, the hour that you were born, you may have one prominent or dominant element. And depending on which one it is, there will be certain characteristics that will be more emphasized. So from the 12 signs, there are 4 groups, and in each group there are 3 signs that belong to an element. 3 belong to the fire, 3 that belong to the air, 3 that belong to the water, 3 that belong to the earth. And each one of the 3 share certain common characteristics, but they're different, they're unique. Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius are all fire elements. And what they all have in common is that they are full of energy and drive. More than the rest, more than the air, more than the water, more than the earth. And when I say energy and drive, I mean that there's also different kind of emphasis in their life, their values, their priorities, their ideas, what drives them, what moves them, what interests them is always going to be something different than what will interest the water, the earth signs. That's one of the things that make people very, very different, is the element. What is the most dominant element? Very important for me to repeat that not everyone is very, very pure of his element. And that is why in discussing a particular sign, you may say, well, 80 to 85% matches my sign from what I've read, from what I've described. That is because there are other factors that contribute to the individuality, to the personality, and a great deal has to do with the hour. The hour is very significant, and in any particular day, help us get along with them. We may not agree, we may not want to be like them, but we definitely could admire some of the traits of those who are totally opposite to us, because we need them. In the end, somehow, we need their contribution. As I have always done, I'd like to give an introduction. This is not only about astrology, this is also about refining one's character, working on one's midot, learning about our own personal weaknesses, what area we need to improve, what needs to be corrected. And Sagittarius has certain strengths, certain ma'alot v'chisronot, and the 5 points that I will point out in the introduction contain some things that we could learn from him and some things that he has to learn. Point number 1, rabbis tell us, "L'olam yeh adam yireh shamayim baseter kemo she'u bagalui." One should always be as God-fearing in private as he is in public. When one is in public, when one has an audience, when people see you, you may tend to behave in a certain way. Whether you are impressing them, whether you're just embarrassed to do what you ordinarily would do. So people in public do not always necessarily behave as they do in private. And therefore, when no one is looking in your private quarters, you may behave differently. One may be a gentleman and very kind and nice to people on the outside, and at home he's abusive of his spouse. Yeah, this happens. Very quiet, makes a nice impression. All of a sudden at home he turns into an animal. Ze govel b'tzviut, as we say in Hebrew. It borders on hypocrisy. But I don't want to call him an hypocrite. It's simply a character or a characteristic that he possesses that tends to come out in private and doesn't come out so much in public. In other words, he's able to contain it very professionally. Not that he's a hypocrite, not that he's two-faced. He's just somehow, in his personality, many of us can do that, is we just handle ourselves differently when we're in public, and when we're in private, when we're amongst our closest relatives, we feel more comfortable, we're not as embarrassed, we behave differently. So it's not so much hypocrisy, but it comes close to it. Rabbis warn us that if you want to be a man of integrity, a woman of integrity, which we've spoken about before, how it's important to strive for integrity, to be amiti, to be always truthful at all times. It's not enough to say the Amidah, the Shmon Esrei, for 55 minutes, moving your head and giving the impression that you're a big tzaddik, that you focus on every word, that you intend to say every word, that you cry. It may not be sincere. It may not be a sincere prayer. It is important that whatever you do in public, you copy and you do in private too. And it's actually a greater challenge in private than it is in public, because nobody sees you except for Hashem. If one remembers that Hashem is observing us at all times, at every moment, even bechadrei chadarim, in the closet, where nobody else could see, then obviously one would be more careful. A lot of people do not sin because they don't want to be caught. They don't want to be embarrassed. But if they would know that He is observing every action and hears every word that we say, regardless of where we are, we would behave differently. Therefore, rabbis emphasize to us, strive for integrity, be who you are, be truthful. Whatever you are in the outside, be in the inside. In other words, if you're God-fearing, hopefully in the outside, strive to be God-fearing in the inside, in private. And that is the ultimate test if somebody is truly God-fearing, when he knows that even though nobody is watching him, he's still careful as much as he would be careful when he's on the outside. Point number 2, be suspicious of all, but be respectful of them. In the rabbi's words, kabdeu vechashdeu. Rabbis tell us, it's actually the other way around. Be respectful of everyone. Really, be nice to everyone, but be suspicious. You don't know someone. You've never met him before. Are you going to invite him into your home? Let him sleep in your home? It could be dangerous. I mean, I think all of us have heard of all sorts of terrible stories of people who were let into their home, assuming that they were good people, and it turned out that they were animals. They did terrible things. You're going to give somebody a loan that you don't know. You're going to ask for co-signers. You're going to be careful how much you give him, because you don't know who he is. You're going to ask for witnesses.